I've studied Jesus' resurrection enough to have only one real doubt about the empty tomb. I don't have any doubts that Jesus was buried in a tomb that was discovered empty days later. And I don't have any doubts that his disciples somehow stole his body in order to perpetrate some kind of a hoax. But I do wonder if there was some kind of innocent mistake. Like maybe the women just went to the wrong tomb. Or maybe someone else, for some unknown reason, moved the body. How can we be sure that there wasn't some kind of innocent mistake that accounts for the empty tomb? Well, there's a number of decisive reasons, but in this blog I'm going to focus on one that often gets overlooked. Unanimously, the gospel writers report that the women go to the tomb and discover it empty on the first day of the week. Given that the Jewish Sabbath is a Saturday, that means that they're discovering the tomb empty on a Sunday. It's the Sunday after Jesus was crucified on that Friday. Technically, it's the third day after his crucifixion, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. However, in the rest of the New Testament, outside of these resurrection narratives, including other sections of the Gospels, the dating of the empty tomb is to the third day. The third day is a loaded symbol, loaded term in the Judaism of Jesus' day. It refers to the general resurrection. So the prophet Hosea in chapter 6, verse 2 says this. He says, on the third day, he, meaning God, will raise us up. And the Talmud, written several centuries after Hosea, has this same sentiment. It talks about this widespread popular expectation that God will raise us up on the third day, meaning referring to the general resurrection. So by Jesus' day, it seems that the third day was the metaphor for the general resurrection. Once the church made that connection, once they realized that Jesus had technically risen on the third day, and then that was evocative of the general resurrection when everybody else will be raised, there was no looking back. They took that symbol of the third day and ran with it because it was so pregnant with meaning. That became the way that they dated the resurrection, the discovery of the empty tomb, and therefore the resurrection. So why then do the gospel writers retain a dating, the first day of the week, that was obsolete, had become obsolete? There's only one reason. It's because it was the more primitive way of talking about the discovery of the empty tomb. It's the way that the story had originally been told. And because this way of dating it lacks any symbolic meaning, because it seems to be a primitive detail that could easily be discarded in favor of one that was more evocative, more pregnant with meaning, most scholars think that there's no reason to doubt what this detail is telling us. And that is huge, because what it's telling us is that we can date the discovery of the empty tomb to within days of Jesus' death, days of his crucifixion. Crucifixion was a public event. It was meant to draw attention to itself. Being a deterrent, it was something that maximized the public exposure, wanted people to pay attention. That's why the Romans chose Golgotha as the site for crucifixions in Jerusalem. Golgotha was right at the gate, the main city gate to the city. So everybody going in and out of the city would see who was being crucified, and the Romans could send the message, don't mess with us, because if you do, that's what we'll do to you. In order to get crucified, Jesus had to create quite a stir. While it's true that the Romans crucified many nameless insurgents without batting an eye, Jesus was different. He wasn't like any other run-of-the-mill criminal. Like a few other messianic pretenders, people who had messianic aspirations, Jesus was somebody who was drawing a lot of attention to himself. And while the Romans could care less about Jewish religious matters, when those matters started to threaten the stability of their control over Palestine, Jerusalem, they paid close attention. So that means that Jesus must have been attracting large crowds that were making the Romans very nervous. It made them feel threatened, even to the point that they decided they needed to eliminate him with capital punishment, with the capital penalty of execution, crucifixion. What all that tells us is that there were many people at the time who had an intense interest in Jesus' fate, friend and foe alike. Not only the people who had put their hopes in him that he might be the actual Messiah and adored him, but also those who wanted to eliminate him and eliminate his radical movement. What that, as one scholar has very cleverly put it, what that tells us is that there was a great cloud of witnesses who were paying attention to the fate of Jesus, to what happened in his death and his burial. The events of that year were kind of like the big story of Passover that year in Jerusalem. They would have been the stuff of street gossip. You could go up to anybody on the streets and ask them about Jesus, and they would know about him and what happened to him and his fate, his death and his burial. And what all this tells us, therefore, is that the discovery of the empty tomb, the dating and discovery of the empty tomb, is early enough, within days of Jesus' crucifixion, and it's public enough, it was the talk of the town, that it practically eliminates the possibility of any mistake. Had there been a mistake, had the women gone to the wrong tomb, had somebody else moved the body inadvertently, there were plenty of people who could have cleared that up right away. In fact, the opponents of Jesus, the enemies of Jesus, had a tremendous motivation to clear it up right away. Had there been an empty tomb, they would have desperately wanted to dispute that in order to prevent his subversive movement from breaking out all over again. And if Joseph of Arimathea was actually the one who buried Jesus in his own tomb, as the Gospels say, then we can be virtually certain that there was no mistake, that any mistake would be corrected easily and right away. That will be the subject of next week's blog. What doubts do you have about the resurrection? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, or questions about it. You can go to the Contact EJ page of the Raising Jesus website and leave them there. I'd love to hear from you. Also, please like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and keep telling your friends about us. I truly appreciate all your support. It means the world to me. Thank you.